Sam Bonham, you manage some of the biggest podcasts on the BBC. So what's the key to a successful podcast?
Hey, I mean, there's loads of keys, right? So people talk about who your talent is, who your host is, and like you're having someone who kind of is recognizable or someone who's just brilliant. Your topic, and making sure your topic is like really focused, making sure that it's really clear what it's about, whether it's news, whether it's entertainment, whatever it is. The tone of the podcast, super important. We work a lot of that on the BBC around just like creating a mood or an atmosphere that kind of works on the podcast. But my goodness, I mean, there's so many different things. And actually, I think one of the interesting things about the podcast market, and we were talking about it today at Radiodays, is like partly we don't always know what's going to succeed. But then partly we're kind of making the rules up as we're going along, and actually, you know, the kind of the systems and the success stories maybe that we have over the course of like the next few years are going to define the industry for a long time to come, I think. So maybe what makes a successful podcast? Maybe I don't know, and maybe nobody knows, but we'll find out.
We'll find out. Okay, so you mentioned the topics. What about the trending topics? What are they now?
I mean, hey, so I work at BBC News, and we've got a kind of portfolio of different news products, kind of domestic news, daily podcast. We've got kind of international news, a daily podcast, and then we've got a podcast on American politics and news. We've got a podcast on Ukraine. We've had a podcast on the Israel-Gaza conflict as well. So from kind of my perspective, like I'm launching podcasts which are focused around specific news events or specific news stories, and actually, you know, I mean, we find that if we're there when the audience wants us to be there, then we will create, you know, we will grow an audience, and we will have success with the podcast.
Yeah. So would you say you love the World Podcast? What do you love about it?
What do I love about podcasts?
What do you love about it?
So I've been working on a podcast called Newscast, which is the BBC's kind of domestic daily podcast offering in news. It goes out 7 days a week on BBC Sounds and elsewhere. And one of the things that the host of that podcast said to me was he thinks that podcast is a great prism through which to view the world. You know, you can view whatever is going on in the world through the prism of Newscast. And I love that, and that excites me, and that means that every day you wake up, you look through the prism and you see something else. So I think from my perspective, like working in news, working on daily news in the podcast space, it's about finding creative ways to tell stories, it's about engaging new audiences, and it's about figuring out what's going on and giving the best kind of insight and analysis that we can on the stories that are happening. Yeah,
and finding so many windows into the world, right?
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you very much, Sam.
Cool. Thank you.